Okay. Last time we started the halachas of sחיטה, we were discussing them, and we pointed out that we're discussing first the sחיטה that's related to dash, right? Of fruits. We're not discussing the sחיטה of malaban. You wring out a garment that's wet. That's to do with cleaning it. So the fruits that are da'araisa are zaysim va'anav, only grapes and olives. Why only these fruits are da'araisa? And there's other fruits are drabanan, but these fruits are da'araisa. Why only these fruits? So point out, Rashi says in Shabbos, because other fruits it's labar chai, it's not the derech to squeeze. And the Ran writes, because only zaysim va'anavim, what comes out, the olive oil and the grape juice, the wine is called a mashka. So Eglei Tal assumes that they're saying the same thing. Since it's Ruchai, that's why it's called a mashka. One caused the other. They don't really say anything different. But the Prima Gonim understands the total difference over here. That what? That according to the Ran, it means has to be halachic mashka. That's only the Zion mashkim. So the only two fruits that produce a liquid, which is from the Zion mashkim, are grapes and olives. Fine. That is what we pointed out last time. Now, l'chora, a nafkamina might be that what? Let's assume a certain fruit becomes the derech to squeeze. A certain fruit becomes the derech to squeeze. So then, if there's a machlokas, or you learn like the they talk on everybody, that's derech. Maybe it could be doraisa, even though we usually don't assume it. But according to the Prima Godim, there's no way another mashke, according to the Ran, could be a doraisa. It can only be a drabban. Ekshahu is generally similarly faced to another doraisa. However, the Shulchan Aruch points out Shinchov Osalim that tutim and rimonim, I guess, used to make juice from the berries and also used to make juice from pomegranate. That is also the drabban, right? Why? So the Mishnah Berurah says because mixes b'nei adam squeeze it. Some people do squeeze it into takana rabban, and you shouldn't come squeeze grapes and olives. This point out in the Mishnah Berurah Sibkat and Hay. Okay, I just wanted to go off on a tangent for 1 minute. I said that if the question was urchayhu, so it can change. And if everybody squeezes oranges, maybe that could be a doraisa. But the whole reason is urchaya. This is Chazon Ish. It goes as follows. There's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah on Daf Tes. And it says as follows. Hashem created the world. The first 2,000 years were Tohu Vavo. And the next 2,000 years are years of Torah. In other words, from year 2,000 to 4,000. And from 4,000 to 6,000, that's the Yemos HaMashiach. That's when the Mashiach will come. And then the 7th millennium, the world rests. Okay? Now, question is, the Marsha already asked, and between 4,000 and 6,000, not years of Torah. What's going on? What happened to Torah? Torah's only from 2,000 to 4,000? So the Marsha says, no, it means it's even Yemos HaMashiach. 2,000 to 4,000 is when only Torah, and 4,000 to 6,000 are days of Torah, but also it can be Yemos HaMashiach. However, there's a Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish writes, I believe it's in Yeridea, as follows. He says that all halachas are based on, halachas are nikbah between 2,000 and 4,000. And all halachas depend upon the mitzias in those years. So he's talking about trephus. He says by trephus, so, it could be that now certain animals that in the times of the Gemara would not live. And now they can live. I don't know. At certain times of Chazal, they could not live and then they'll live. So it doesn't matter. What's called the trefa is nikbah then, and not what the mitzias is. Now, so I'm just wondering, how far this goes. How far does this go? And therefore, didn't used to see oranges, and now this would have made a drabanan. Don't know. I don't know. I mean, some guy once started up with me once about this when I said this, that what about Davar Shabbat Chol Nefesh in Yantav? You mean that can't change? In times of the Gemara, people didn't take showers, and now people take showers every day, so it's not going to change. But I don't know how far you can apply it to the Chazon Ish. But Shechter talks about it. And he writes there about the brain death. He talks about this Chazon Ish. Anyway, let's go back over here, back to sחיטה. So there's a takana drabanan a mashkin shezavu. Comes up here in Shulchan Aruch and Shinchot Sif Aleph. It's a Gemara in Beit Tzedaf Gimel, and it is as follows. Let's say I have grapes and olives, and on Shabbos, I don't know, they got very ripe, and some of the oil started coming out, or some of the grape juice started coming out. It's because mashkim shezavu, the juices that flow out by themselves on Yom, right? So it's easy to drop on it to drink these things, to use these things. Why? Because if you use them, you might come to actually squeeze. Now, this applies by all fruits, whether it's a deraisa or drabanan. If you can't squeeze it, you can't use the mashkin that come out. However, where it's a dioraisa, like grapes and olive, it doesn't matter why you picked them. It doesn't matter whether they were picked for grape juice and olive oil, or they were picked to eat as grapes and olive. It doesn't matter. Any liquid that comes out on Shabbos or Yantam, you're not allowed to use. While by tutim and rimonim, it's only drabanan, and then it's only if they were picked for juice purposes, making juice out of them, and after you pick teeth. Then mashkin shezavu is mutter. Then one last point, the Mishnah points out, if it was picked for no specific purpose, then even by tutim rimonim, also you can't have the mashkin shezavu. Okay, so it comes out in Shulchan Aruch that what zeisem and anavu d'oraisa tutim rimonim drabanan. Now, what about other fruits? What about other fruits? Let's break this down. Let's assume nobody squeezes this fruit. Only one guy squeezes this fruit. So Moshe is told there's no problem. No problem. The Bach holds, no, this guy's you can't squeeze this. You can't squeeze it. This is awesome. Even though he wants to squeeze it now, he doesn't do it on a regular process. Mishnah passing the Sivkot and Ches that we don't pass in like the Bach, but in a place they're knowing to machmer like the Bach, it shouldn't be made. Now that's one guy is a Mishagas. Let's assume in a certain place they squeeze a certain fruit. In a certain place they squeeze it. Let's say you live in New Zealand, and there they squeeze kiwis. They make kiwi juice. Okay, you know where else they do it. So the Ramah says in New Zealand, right, you can't squeeze it. The rest of the world you can squeeze it. Unnecessary, right? Unless they export it. If it's exported to the rest of the world from New Zealand, then you can't squeeze it anywhere. That is the opinion of the Ramah. It's explained by the Mishnah Ches. However, the Magen Avraham has a different sheet. It's also quoted in there in the Mishnah Berurah, and he says once they squeeze it in one place, it can affect the rest of the world. Why? Why do they squeeze it? Is there a reason they squeeze it or not? If they squeeze it because they just have an overabundance of this fruit and there's nothing to do with them, they have overabundance of kiwis, then and if we would have so many kiwis, we would also squeeze it and make juice. Then once they squeeze it, you can't squeeze it in the whole world. But if you just, let's say, we would never squeeze it. We would never squeeze it. And we, no matter how much of this we had, we would never squeeze it in 10,000 years. They have their own mishagas. So then, so you look there and look in the Ber Halacha, it's not clear whether it's only also there or it's also in the rest of the world. Period. Okay. Then let's assume nobody squeezes it. You only squeeze it for medicinal purposes. The Rambam says that's mutter. Okay. Now there's a bit of a problematic mechaber here. Mechaber writes in Sif Zion, you're allowed to squeeze lemons. Now, Mr. Brewer says you shouldn't rely on this because now a lot of people squeeze these, right? It says now, you know. Says that nowadays we know we always squeeze lemons and make full a lot of lemon juice. You shouldn't rely on this mechaber. Whatever it's all, yeah. If you really want to know the topic well, you have to look at the Mishnah Brewer there. It's in Kochav Beis why the mechaber thought lemons were different. New point: you squeeze a fruit. And the fruit is squeezed as a dip. It's not squeezed to drink. You squeeze it into a bowl, and then you dip. I don't know. You dip things in it. Dip fruit into it. So Mishnah Berurah writes in Sivkot and Ches, this is mutter. You can squeeze it, except for grapes and olives. Except for grapes and olives. Grapes and olives are the right thing. No. Everything else even though you normally, it's a drabanan, you squeeze it only to dip in, that's mutter. Why? So the Mishnah Berurah says, because you're not using it as a mashka. It's not being squeezed as a mashka. Now, I want to add a few points. There's a halacha in Hilchos Yom Kippur. You know, in Yom Kippur, you can't eat and you can't drink. And what's the shiur for eating? A koseves, right? A date, dry date. And what's the shiur of drinking? A mole lugma, right? It's okay if somebody is sick and has to eat in Yom Kippur, and eat shiur, he has to eat, less than a koseves in the time of achilas pras, and drink less than a mole lugma b'chikful. And the solids and liquids don't combine. In other words, in the same kidei achilas pras, you can eat a little bit, drink a little bit. So it says there in Shulchan Aruch, on Tav Beis Yud Beis, Subcotton Beis, that if you have, let's say, a food, but there's some liquid on it. I don't know, you have a piece of meat, there's some gravy on it, right? The gravy is mitzaref to the shiur of a kosev. The gravy is a liquid, it doesn't matter, but it's not being drunk, it's eaten as part of the food, it's mitzaref to the shiur of the food. So you see, sometimes a liquid can be considered a machal and not a mashka, as on Yom Kippur. It's mitzaref to the shiur kosev. Likewise, use it as a dip, it's not a mashka. And if you realize, it's also relevant to something else. Let me ask you a question. What bracha do you make on orange juice? Right. I can't hear you. I saw you say charcoal. Right?
There's a lot of pulp, no?
No, I still, even if you eat pulp.
Even if it's a lot of pulp?
Pulp, you can't, this pulp you make a prepared.
I don't know. I don't drink orange juice with pulp.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Okay. Now, what bracha do you make on tomato juice? Okay, machlokas. Rav Moshe Feinstein holds you make an adam. Why is tomato juice different? Tomato juice is different because how do they make tomato juice? They don't squeeze the tomatoes. What they do is they boil them. It's like they make tomato soup, and then they just take the liquid, and then and that's the tomato juice. So Rav Moshe holds it's like, it's a soup, right? So then what? Then you make a brei pri adam. That's what Moshe Feinstein shita. Now Rabbi Shechter argues because he has this whole thing. Soup is eaten as a machal, but if you drink it, that's a mashka, and you always make a shakol. So Rabbi Shechter always make a shakol, and Rabbi Moshe Feinstein always make a brei pri adam. So Rabbi Shechter is already distinguishing. Depends how you eat it. Sometimes something is a machal, sometimes it's a mashka. Rabbi Shechter talks about this also in Vikvei Atzon. It has relevance about sometimes they have these lebens that are very watery, right? So is it you need a revis to make a bracha for you, size, whatever. So get a lot of different things for it. I just want to point out, even when you can squeeze something, right, for a dip, you can't use the kli amiyuchad lakach, right, because it's uvda dechol. Right, this is pointed out in the Shiur Shabbos, and both in Rabbi Yair. I read on page 98, the Shiur Shabbos Perkei Halacha Gimel. Just want to sum up this point. What did we learn so far? We learned that Zeisim and Anovim are Doraisa, Tutim and Rimonim are Drabonan, and L'char, anything else admitted that the derech is to squeeze becomes a Drabonan. We started discussing what only a certain place, only a certain person, whatever. Then we discussed now also mashlim shezov, liquids that come out on Shabbos. And we discuss now also what about squeezing it to make a dip. So zeisim and nover are osir, and other fruits are mutter. Okay, next. You want to take a fruit and hold it here. It's sick. How do you say? Slurp out, suck out the liquid, right? Suck out the liquid. So you look in the Ramah in Shin Chav Sif Aleph, he has a machlokas. So Mishnah Berurah explains there. It's Yud and Yud Beis. Those are Mekel say that's not derech schicha. You put it on your lips and squeeze it out. And the Macharim say no, but nevertheless it's also midrabban. Halacha l'maisa Mishnah Berurah passing the sifkat in Yud Beis. Zeisim and Rabbi should be machmir. Other fruits it's okay to be Mekel. But then he says Even by Zaysim Ba'anavim, the whole machlokas is you hold it here and suck it out. You put the whole olive in your mouth, the whole grape in your mouth, and inside your mouth, you suck out the juice. That is mutter. That's derech machal. Okay, new point. Gemara says in Shabbos from Kuf Mem Hey, Amar Aleph. Gemara says over there, Amar Abchia. Amar Abchia Bar Ashi, Amar Rab. Sochet Adam Eshkol Shel Anavim L'toch HaKdera. You can squeeze grapes into a pot of food, but not into an empty bowl. Not into an empty bowl. Right? Why? So the Beis Yosef quotes a Rashi who says, "Ein zu derech precursor." This is not the way you pull apart the liquid from the salad, right? That's why it's awesome. It's a mutter. Because ein ze derech precursor. You look in the Rif, he says the point is that the Tolda is making a mashka from a salad, right? Mashka mitoch ocha. That's schitta. But here, it's a machal when it's in the fruit, and it's a machal where it lands, because it lands into the what? Into the food. So you ocha, the toch ocha, dinoka ocha. You're not ever making a mashka because it goes straight into a fruit. Okay? So comes out Rashi saying derech because of bekach, and the Rib says because you never have a mashka. Now, I understood it. It's a machlokas. However, the Mishnah Brura, you look at Shulchan Aruch, it's Shiur Sif Dalet. So the Shulchan Aruch quotes Hezbollah the Rib. Ocha Palatoch, Ocha Kolchana. Mishnah Brura quotes Rashi. All right, but then Sharatzian, he writes in a footnote that it's all one thing. He understands that, I don't know, that since why is it not derech because it ends up as an ocha? I don't know. It seems to me there's a machlokas. Mishnah Berurah assumes not to. They're both saying the same thing. Now, this is what Rav Sheet is. You're allowed to do it. There's a big machlokas rishonim whether you're passing like Rav here or not. The shaila is the other Amoraim. Are you there in the Gemara or not? Halacha l'maisa, the Rif of the Rambam passing like this kula. You can squeeze into food. And Rabbeinu Chananel says we don't pass him like. Now the Shulchan Aruch quotes this twice, both in Shulchan. In Sif Dalet, he quotes the Machlokas, and excuse me, I take that. One moment. Is he quote both sheets this year or just later on? No, I apologize. Here he only quotes the Meko Shita. Here he only quotes the Meko Shita, and now what you're allowed to do it, correct? But in Sif Zayin, he quotes the Rabbeinu Hanano. He quotes both Shitas. Halacha l'maisa, the Mishnah Berurah, both in Sif Kot and Yud Zayin, Sif and Lam, it says Mikra din is mutter, right? It's tov l'hachmer. Hamachmer tov olav bracha. Hamachmer tov olav bracha. So you let it squeeze into food. This is the shita of Rav. Machaber brings it in Sif Dalet. Chris said again, it's Sif Zayin. The Rabbeinu Chananel says we don't pass like Rav, and the Machaber quotes it in the second place. And the Mishnah Berurah says that it's mutter, but it's tov l'hachmer. Now the Mishnah Berurah writes both in the Ber Halacha, in Sif Vav, and in the Mishnah Berurah Sif Kar Chafei, even though there's a heater, not to rely on this, but by lemon, there's a shayla anyway, you're allowed to rely on this lachatchila by lemons. So you squeeze lemons into food. Now the Shmir Shabbos, you just read the Mishnah Berurah, thinks it's special kula by lemons. Shmir Shabbos and Perkei Halacha Dalet assume it's not just by lemons. You can be meko by anything that the schitas drab on, i.e., just you have to be the chumrah. There's a heater, not to do it by grapes and apples. So it comes out after Shmir Shabbos is done. Anything that the schitas is drab on, you can squeeze into food, not just lemons. And by where it's a doraisa, so mikra din you can also do it, but there's a heater not to do it. Okay. Now, if you squeeze into a liquid, there's a liquid here, and I squeeze fruit, lemon into a liquid, so that's awesome. That's awesome. And likewise, you squeeze into an empty clay, and this is also a dough rice. Again, it's grapes and olive. Okay. Now, there's a very the lashon over here in the Mishnah Berurah, Sifkat Chafez. If you don't add a tube, you just go right over it. But it's not so. He's very medayek here. He says, here is this. You can squeeze into the food and on top of the food. Not just into the food and on top of the food. So to fully understand it, you have to look in Hilchos Yantiv. In Hilchos Yantiv, there's the following halacha. This is in Simon Tov Kufay Seif Aleph. Okay. It's based on the Gemara in Shabbos on Kuf Mem Daled on the day. It says here, Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said, V'divrei Rabbeinu. Rabbeinu is Shmuel there. Now Shmuel says the same thing as Rav there. You can squeeze into food. So he says, from what Shmuel said, you can squeeze into food, right? We learned the following halacha. You can milk a person can milk his goat, his cow, into a pot of food, but not into an empty bowl. That's what he says. Correct? Why? Because it's ochel going into ochel. Now, remember, according to most Shitas, the problem of milking a cow or an animal is a problem like squeezing a fruit. The same thing. So if you do it into food, you can squeeze into food a fruit. You can also milk a cow into the fruit. Okay. This is quoted in Hilchos Yantiv. The Tov Kufhei Seif Aleph. Now, if you look there in Hilchos Yantiv, Tov Kufhei, the Mechaber writes specifically, either it means that the milk has to be absorbed into the food, or B, it comes to be metakena food, right? Comes to metakena food. The Mishnah Berurah writes over there in Hilchos Yantiv, Sifchan Hein Vav, that it has to be that most of it will be absorbed, or most of it is litzarach. You can't, let's say, squeeze a lemon into sugar and have a little sugar and make a whole puddle of lemon juice. Most of it has to be absorbed. So it comes out, this heter to squeeze into food means either it has to be absorbed or it has to be metaki. Let me give you an example. You squeeze it sometimes into food, right? You want it, for whatever reason you want it, but the point is it has to be absorbed. But sometimes it's not to be absorbed. For example, people sometimes squeeze a lemon on a salad. On a salad, let's say on the lettuce, it's not going to get absorbed. You'll see it on top of the leaf of lettuce, but it comes to be takenet. Either one is mutter. That's what the Mishnah Berurah is writing with Dayak here. He writes, "Sachta live tapshil, you took it into the tapshil, or al gabia or on top of the fruit." Okay, so either one is mutter. Either one is mutter. The Shiur Shabbos writes this Barachel Bitcha Haktana. He says this in Halacha Gimel, and he quotes the whole explanation in the footnote Yud Gimel. I just want to have a side point here. You might ask me, okay, the main halacha was said by Shabbos, squeezing into fruits. Why, when they talk about milking, the Gemara talk about Yantiv, and why is it quoted only in Hilchos Yantiv and not in Hilchos Shabbos? So I'm just telling you, the answer I'm going to give you is an oversimplification. Just 1 second. It's an oversimplification, and it's a little more complicated than this. I just want to explain. What's the Av Malacha here? Dosh. Dosh, what do you mafarek? You mafarek the ochel from the psal. And what's the tolda? Schiita. You mafarek the mashke from the ochel. Okay? Now, on when you milk a cow, the two things. That udder is a solid, and the milk is a liquid. But it's right, but it's also something else. On Shabbos, right? On Shabbos, you can't shech, right? So the udder right now is psolos. You can't eat the udder, right? But the milk, theoretically, you might be able to drink, right? So therefore, what you're separating is not only a solid, a liquid from a solid, you're also celebrating a liquid from something which is edible now from something you can't eat now, right? All from salts. Therefore, if you milk into food, it's not necessarily going to be so pushing that at least that it's going to be mutter. On Shabbos is the yantiv. Because in yantiv you can chef the animal and eat it. So in yantiv it's only a problem of mashke from ochel and you squeeze into food, that's okay. But on Shabbos, you also have to deal with the problem that because you can't chef on Shabbos, on a certain level, it is what? Ochel from psolas, and that squeezing into food is not going to help, at least on a drabbon level, and that's why the halacha is only quoted in Hilchos Yantiv. Again, it's a little more complicated now. Yaakov, you want to do something or not? Guess not. Well, Yaakov, you there? No. Okay. Now, halacha is that what? Again, there's a halacha that what Rab says, and Shmuel says you can squeeze into food. Correct? Rambam would have paskin like it, and we didn't read paskin like it. The Rabbeinu Chanano says we don't paskin like it, and there's a heater to follow the Rabbeinu Chanano, except in lemons, and according to Shabbos, you make it also an old drabbon. Fine, that's what we said. And then we said though, this heter, right, is only when it's absorbed in the food, or what, or when it's metaken. Now, let's assume, when do people use this? They squeeze into sugar to put it into the tea. Now, the problem is you're not really want to have the sugar. You're not going to have the sugar with the lemon juice. You're just using it as a trick or a targil to dump it in the tea afterwards. So the real goal is to take the lemon, pull out the lemon juice, and put it in a liquid. But if you squeeze into a liquid, right, that's awesome. So the question is, if you squeeze into a food, like the sugar, but the truth is you just got to put it a minute later into the tea, are you allowed to do that or not? So Mishnah Berurah writes it's mutter. He writes Mefurish, it's a kon chafez, you can squeeze first into the sugar, doesn't matter. The Chazon Ish argues, in Siman Nun Vav O Zion, the Chazon Ish argues and says this is osur. He says only if you eat most of the sugar, the way it is with the lemon, there's a drop left, then maybe you can dump it in the tea. And then he says you can rely on this, I think a little bit left over for a child who needs something for a food. Okay, but otherwise don't do it. Shmir Shabbos in Perkei Halacha quotes both opinions, and Rabbi Eider says he says it's better to be machmir, right, and use prepared lemon juice, or put a slice of lemon in the tea. Okay, I just want to reiterate that I just discussed sחיטה. We also have to discuss Hilchos bishul here. You have a hot cup of tea, right? So as follows: to put a piece of lemon in. So it depends. If your tea is a klisheni, you're making tea in a klisheni, or you made it with tree acids, then there's a chumrah not to put the slice of lemon into as a klishlishi. Fine, if you hold the chumrah of klishlishi. If you you squeeze into the sugar and put it in, so you're not putting a piece of lemon. I don't know. Could we also have a problem? If you use prepared lemon juice and the prepared lemon juice you buy in a bottle and it's cooked in the factory, so it's a liquid which is cooled off. Yeah, if you remember, Mishnah Berurah says a cooled off liquid you put in a cliche. So remember, besides you always have to deal with any bishul aspects here. Tov. Yes. Now, Yaakov, your hand is up. That's why I think you want to say something. Your hand is still up.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Now, Let's assume the fruit has an excess liquid, and you want to squeeze it to get rid of the excess liquid. So Mishnah Brura writes in Shin Beis Sivkam Chav Dalet, this is mutter, except for grapes and olives. Now there are 3 shittas over here, if I'm not mistaken. You look in the Mishnah Brura, he says you're allowed to squeeze into a bowl, even though you're not squeezing down the vein. You can squeeze in the bowl, and even though you're not squeezing directly, right? That's what he says over here. Now, the Shiur Shabbos in Perkei Halacha Ches takes us a step further. I know where he got it from. He says, and afterwards, you have your lemon juice in the bowl. If you decide you want to use it, you're allowed to use it. You have to spill it out. Now, I was wondering where he gets it. And he says he quotes the Mishnah Brura there, but the footnote, but I don't know. It doesn't say that in the Mishnah Brura. I'm not sure exactly where he gets this from. You can use it. Anyway, that's shita number 1. You can squeeze it, except for grapes and olives, and you can do it in a bowl. I understand you have to spill out afterwards, but the Shmir Shabbat understands you can use it afterwards if you decide to. Now the Chai Adam disagrees. Klal Yodah Halacha Hey, he says no, you have to squeeze straight into the garbage. Straight into the garbage. Now finally, Aruch HaShulchan doesn't like the whole thing. This isn't Sifyu test. He says you can't squeeze any fruit at all, not just grapes and olives. If even though there's an excess liquid, the only thing you're allowed to squeeze when you have excess liquid or when it's not the natural juice. Like you squeeze out the extra brine or whatever it is from the pickle or something that was cooked. But something that's natural juice, you can't squeeze out even though it's just a misaki. Those are the 3 shittas. So the Mishnah says you can, and into a bowl, and then he understood. Shabbos says you can use it afterwards, the liquid. I understood not. Or I didn't know where it says you can. Chayim says you have to squeeze straight into the sink, into the garbage. And the Aruch HaShulchan says the heter is limited only to liquids that came in afterwards. Okay. Let's talk about halacha l'maisa shayla now. You have a half a grapefruit in front of you, and you're eating it with a spoon. Correct? Now, usually you scoop out the piece, and then you stick your spoon in to get out what's left. Now, between you and me, there's a psik ratio when you do that you're squeezing and getting grapefruit juice onto your spoon, right? So you're allowed to do this or not. So Mishmir Shabbos writes in Perkei Halacha Yud Beis it's mutter, and also in Rabbi Shechter it's mutter. Why is it mutter? So let's start like this. Shmir Shabbos points out in the footnote, it's a double drabban. First of all, squeezing grapefruits is only a drabban to begin with. Second thing is, it's kalachar. This is not the way you squeeze a grapefruit. Squeeze a grapefruit like this, or like this. But with the spoon, it's not the way you squeeze it. So it's a drabbanan kalachar yad. All right? Now, it's not your intent. So, right, you just want to scoop it out just by the psikration. So a psikration and a double drabbanan, or psikration and drabbanan, where it's kalachar yad, that's mutter. That is reason number 1. And that's the reason I think Rabbi Shechter gave as well. Now, Shmir Shabbos has another reason there, which I did not hear from Rabbi Shechter. And that is that when you squeeze it out, you usually have a mixture of fruit and liquid. That's not called sחיטה. Not called sחיטה. There's always a mixture of pieces in this. Now, I thought of another reason, but I'm not aware anybody says it. I think I told you before that a liquid can be have a mashke, you can drink it or eat it as a dip. So here too, you're having it on the spoon, not having it as a liquid, right? Don't know. Because the conclusion is something which is pretty unquestionable. You squeeze into soup, I'm not aware you can. So, I'll tell you, there's a Shimra Shaila somewhere else. I'll tell you where you have a Shimra Shaila. Let's assume you have a birthday cake, right? This is a birthday cake, right? And it says happy birthday. So you're allowed to eat it. You're allowed to eat it. You're eating a letter. you're eating happy, whatever. You're allowed to eat it or not. So this is all discussing in Shin Mem, right? I think the Ramah says in Shuva you shouldn't do it. And the Dogma Ravava says he doesn't see what the problem is, for reasons I'll explain in a minute. And then he says, all right, you shouldn't cut it. Don't cut it on Shabbos, but you can what? You can eat it. You can eat it. That's what he writes. Okay. Now, what this whole cheshbon? He said. No, the point is as follows. That's how the Mishnah Berurah passes. In other words, his mikra din you can cut it as well. Just at least eating is more partial. That's how the Mishnah Berurah says. Don't cut it. I think you're allowed to eat it. Now, what's the cheshbon? You're erasing the letters when you eat it. So cheshbon is, first of all, it's a drabon. It's not mochek almanas lichto. There's no tikkun here. You're just destroying the letters. That's number one. It's not. You can have a tikkun, either mochek almanas lichto, or theoretically you can have possibly a tikkun. There's an extra letter or two in the Sefer Torah, and you erase them. Now the Sefer Torah becomes kosher. But here it's so for no tikkun. It's only a drabon. Number two, this is not the way you usually erase things, right? Not by chewing them or cutting a piece of cake. So, and it's not your intent. So it's a dov she'eino miskaven with a psik reisha in a drabanan with what? With a shinui, right? You say it's makalka, but kitzer, that's the cheshbon why it is really is mutter. It's the same type of cheshbon. Halacha l'maisa, the Mishnah Berurah says don't cut it, but you can eat it. Now, if you make even on the cutting, so we always tell people when you open a wrapper, don't rip the letters. That's what the Shmir Shabbos says, right? Don't rip the letters. Don't rip the letters. This whole cheshbon is the same thing there. It's not almanas lichtov. It's no tikkun. It's eino miskaven. You just want to open the thing up, and it's kalachayad. It's not the way you erase. The whole cheshbon. So why do you tell people not to do it? You tell people not to do it. You say, you're not supposed to cut the cake. But I think Rabbi Yosef is dafka meiko. You don't have to worry about this. You can rip it, and I'll tell you, it's nogea sometimes. Sometimes, you have these cards with medicines in them. Sometimes there's stuff written on the back. If you didn't punch it out before Shabbos, it's very hard to get it out without destroying the letters. So, if a guy really needs it, somebody really medically needs a medicine, it's probably what the B'samich on you're allowed to do it. By the way, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, Shmir Shabbos quotes him, you're allowed to cut between the letters of a word. You just can't cut a letter. But between the letters, even of one word, you're allowed to cut. And if it's a script and all letters are connected, I don't know. Okay, so both Rabbi Shechter and the Shmir Shabbos say you're allowed to eat the grapes. Now, I'm under the impression that according to Rabbi Posen, in Hilchos Shabbos, you're not allowed to do it. Now, he doesn't talk about it right directly that I'm aware of, but he writes over there on page Chaf Beis, when you cut a lemon, you slice a lemon, so you should cut it in a place where the liquid runs off into the it doesn't collect on the thing you're cutting, right, on a plate. There too, it's the same thing. Squeezing lemons is a drabon, right? And you have no contention there of making any juice. And even though there's a psik reisha, it's kalachayat. You just still don't do it, right? The only cheshbon you have here that you don't have there is the cheshbon of the Shmir Shabbos that the pieces are mixed in. I don't know. By the way, with your grapefruit, don't worry about mashing shetzavu. Why? Because even if it came out, you put it, the grapefruit here is to eat, not to make juice out of. And mashing shetzavu, when it's not grapes and olives, it's only you have it to make grape juice or make the juice out of it. Make the juice out of it. But if it's here to be eaten and it's not tasting my love, you don't have to worry about mashing shetzavu. That's why halacha l'maisa, you're allowed to what? You are allowed to you don't have to worry about it. Fine, go. Until now, we have discussed natural liquids, right? I hinted to something else. you have sometimes like in a pickle or cooked vegetables. What's the story with squeezing them out, right? So if you squeeze it out just to get rid of excess liquid, that's mutter. You squeeze it out for the liquid, So according to Rabbi, it's a drabanan, according to Shmuel, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's an Isur Dioraisa. So maybe I'll leave this for next week, okay? This has relevance also when you want to squeeze the oil out of the can of tuna, whatever. We'll have to discuss that next week.